Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So this is interesting. I'm on X right now. Okay, now it's showing live. Okay.
At the top of my screen, it says
X right now.
your audience.
What's that?
At the top of my screen, top right, it says stream this to your audience, but is that something else?
Okay. Did you try clicking that one?
No.
Yeah,
Scared.
try that one. It's up at the top of your screen?
Yeah, it says log in or create an account to send this stream to your own social account.
Yeah, go ahead and log in.
The
Great.
StreamYard?
Yeah, StreamYard. That's the software. Welcome, folks. We're going to begin soon. Taking care of a couple technical issues here, and we will begin shortly.
I don't think I have an account.
Well, I think it's just asking for your X account. It should be.
Okay, right now, it's asking for StreamYard. Let me do the other method.
Oh, really? Okay.
Let me see here.
Welcome, folks. We're going to begin momentarily. Just waiting a few minutes for a couple other people to join us. If you wouldn't mind, you can repost this this video so other people can see that you're watching, and hopefully we'll gather a few others to view. Hopefully there'll be quite a few, because this is going to be a great show tonight. It's the finale of this series, and I think we've saved the best till last. While we're waiting, folks, I do want to tell everybody we would love to know who is watching right now. So drop us a hello in the comment below. And to do so, you don't want to comment on the post itself. You want to click the video, and then if you're on a desktop, I think you're going to see a live chat over to the side. And if you're on your phone, you're going to see a chat at the bottom of the screen. So click in there. Tell us hello. I know we've had a few issues with our chats. I'm going to go ahead and say hello in the live chat, and you guys can let me know. Okay, I see Hunter Love is saying hello, everyone. How you doing, Hunter? Glad you're joining us, buddy. You think you had any luck, Shelly, with it shown going live?
It needed me to first set up an account with StreamYard, and it was asking for my credit card and everything, and I didn't want to.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's one more of those things I got to figure out. Okay.
That's okay.
Well, sorry about that.
That's okay. And otherwise, the three dots just say I can give myself an avatar.
Yeah, okay. I'll have to figure that out. All right, we're going to get rid of the little intro video there and show our faces to everybody. Hey, everybody. Glad you all could join us this evening. We are winding down our series with the best episode. This is looking at the interior of St. Mark's Basilica, and we've got our wonderful expert guest, Shelly. She has a great account on X, and if you're not following her, please do yourself a favor and make sure you follow her on X. I have her handle in the post for this video, and we'll share that again after the show. But Shelly, you want to open us up? Just tell us a little bit about your account and the business that you've got. It's pretty exciting. It's basically, I think, sharing the kind of information you're sharing right now, but helping people plan for vacation. Could you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah. I took off my glasses for a second because it's just a huge glare. So yeah, this is kind of a retirement gig. And it started with me teaching about how to look at art, how to read art, read old churches. I have a background in European history and art history. And I found that a lot of people like me, like professionals or soon to retire professionals, were just really interested in these things because they traveled a lot, but they had not had time in their professional careers to really learn about them.
Yep.
So I just started series like on, taking a really deep dive into the Sistine Chapel, things like that. And then it evolved into the travel aspect where I would actually do some really in-depth travel coaching leading up to a trip to Italy. So like say Venice, that's my specialty. So that before you even went there, you had a really good sense of the lay of the land, how to get around, the etiquette, but most of all, a good sense of the culture and the history and the actual things you would see. So it's not just a blur of pretty things that you don't
Right.
understand, or just an avalanche of information coming at you all at once. So it's been a really pretty effective thing that I'm still kind of working on, and now it's evolved into like last time a group hired me just to prep them before they went, and then they actually hired me to go with them. So it's kind of evolving.
So let me ask you, if let's say I'm going to go to Spain, or I'm going to go to Rome or something like that, I can contact you, and you can do a consultation and kind of help me figure out how to plan. What are kind of like the couple options you might have for me for trip planning?
Okay, so yeah, and my area of specialty is going to be mostly Italy,
Okay.
and then and England.
Okay.
So I could just help you build out a trip based on your interest, your budget, your time. Help you find the best place to stay for your budget. Sometimes we think something looks good, but it's actually in a terrible location.
Right.
I can help
That can
you
make all the difference.
yeah, with the best tours, the best time to take the tours, things like that. And then if
Uh-huh.
you wanted to go beyond, I could actually, just through a series of like webinars, Zoom calls, give you some really in-depth pre-travel prep to help you know exactly what to expect with your flights, with your arrival, with getting around, what you're going to see, who the, major players were in the history.
Okay.
Just say you're going to feel like you've almost taken a mini college course in your destination, but of
Yeah.
course, a little more fun, hopefully, than that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it just brings a lot of value. If you're going to pay all that money for a fantastic trip to
Yeah.
Europe, just spend a little more and make it fabulous
Yeah,
and real
I've been
meaningful.
on trips and with people, and I hear them saying to each other, "Oh, it's just another church," and they just walk past everything. They don't appreciate
Mhm.
it because they didn't know going into it
Right.
what they're seeing,
Mhm.
and they just get frustrated because they tried to go to some museum or some palace at the wrong time. They didn't book it ahead of time. They had no clue. They just thought,
Right.
I'm buying a ticket and I'll figure it out when I'm there, and that is not the way to do it. We lead such busy lives that it's 100% worth it to talk to somebody like you and be prepared. So they can DM you on X, right? And
Mhm.
you also are going to have a newsletter coming out. Can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that, and then we'll get started with
Okay. Yeah.
Basilica?
So I'm working on getting a newsletter started because on platforms like X, I can do little snippets, but it's not really conducive to taking a deep dive and looking more in depth. And I'm a little hesitant to sharing very specific travel tips because, like
Yeah,
I mentioned last week, sometime once the influencers or once it gets out there, then all of a sudden
yeah,
in a tiny place like Venice, it's not special anymore. So
right.
maybe some more personalized travel tips. And I don't know if I will do it. I've thought about doing it through a subscription, but I'm still a fairly small account. I'm not sure how that works, but that's something that once I figure it out, I'll put it out there.
Okay. So for right
And
now, the
let
best
everyone.
thing is people should DM you, get in touch with you. She is super easy to talk with people. She is so knowledgeable. I've talked with her offline and back and forth with some of her threads, and she is just a wealth of knowledge. And even though she's saying her specialty is Italy, trust me, she knows way more about, I'm sure, all of Europe than most of us combined. So, should we dig into St. Mark's Basilica, the interior?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I bet you guys thought I was never going to let you in, right?
Well, this is a super special place in a super special city, nation, and it is like a time capsule. If you have not been to Venice, it is an absolute jewel. It's unique among the European cities, and I just fell in love with it when I was there last May. Shelly's walked us through in a couple videos before this. They're on her account. They're on my account, so you can find those. Watch the reruns if you haven't watched them already. But tonight, Shelly, what are we going to see tonight?
Okay, so today we're going to actually go inside, and it's just it's a breathtaking church. Obviously, it's very, very old, and to me, with my background in history, anything old is for some reason just really cool to me. But it predates the Sistine Chapel by about 500 years, and there's parts of it that go back over 1,000 years. And again, like I've mentioned before, it's a hodgepodge, so there's different dates to different parts of the church. But
Sure.
the new part of the church dates from 1094, and then the decoration cycle has evolved over 600 years. But the mosaics inside, I'll kind of give you an idea of how to kind of visually guesstimate the date of the different groups of mosaics that kind of were in cycles and phases. But like the like the Sistine Chapel tells the whole story basically of the Bible on the walls and ceiling, and then in the Last Judgment. St. Mark's does the same thing, only with mosaics, and it's just gorgeous. It's been called it's been called the Church of Gold because of its golden glittering interior. It's been called St. Mark's Bible because the whole Bible is told on the walls and ceilings, and it's just a really special place. And it's not been the official church of Venice until 1807. Actually, the official church of Venice until then was way out on the eastern part of the island.
Okay. Great. So what are we seeing here?
So this is just St. Mark's again at sunset. And the first St. Mark's, like we discussed last week, was started in 828, burned down in 976. The new one was completed in 1094, but there are a few elements of each of the old ones.
So can I ask you real quick? So 828 or something like that, that's about the time that Mark's body was brought here, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So before St. Mark was the saint of Venice, it was St. Theodore. Was there a church at this location? Was it, St. Theodore's Basilica, or did
there
he have
was
a place?
not. Now, I think St. Theodore had a church nearby, and I think there was maybe a church there before St. Mark's body came, but not this grand of a church.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah. And so it's just beautiful. And we don't have time to really talk about the floors. I just wanted to show you guys a couple of pictures because they're fabulous. And a lot of these old churches have great floors. They're just usually covered with tourists or carpets. And oftentimes they're very geometric because in the Renaissance mind, geometry was a reflection of the perfect universe of God, the perfect order of creation. So you see lots of geometric patterns like this. The one on the right is believed to have been designed by the famous artist Paolo Uccello, who was very into geometry and perspective. So just keep in mind, if you go to St. Mark's, look down as much as you can. The patterns change throughout. It's kind of like a quilter's dream. You can get all kinds of quilting inspiration from these patterns, but it's just fabulous.
All right, and this is a map of the church, and like most churches, it is in a cruciform shape, but this one's a little bit different. Is this a Byzantine shape, or is it like Greek Orth? I don't know the different, but
It's
it's got like
kind
a
so yes, and thank you, David, for making these maps. They're going to be
yeah,
really helpful. It
absolutely.
like most things in Venice, and like most things in regard to this church, it's a little bit of a hodgepodge. A true Greek cross, all the arms would be equal. So this
Uh-huh.
is a little more of a Western, like a cruciform design, where the nave, what we see running horizontally, is a little bit longer than the transept. But here in this one, it looks a lot closer to a Greek cross.
Yeah.
But we're going to start in the narthex, sometimes called the porch, even though it's enclosed. And that's
Uh-huh.
what David has shown in lavender. We'll make our way through that, and then we will just enter and go up the nave, and we'll turn to the left and the right a little bit, and then we'll come back down the nave. So we're just going to take a little bit of a tour and
So
pretend that we're inside.
I've heard these terms, the nave, the transept, and all this. The nave, like you said a minute ago, is left and right on the screen. So this cross is kind of laid on its side right now. If it was standing up like a regular cross, it would be turned 90 degrees to the left. And the nave, I guess, is like from the foot of the cross to the head of the cross. And the transept is like what the arms would be nailed to, going perpendicular to the nave. Is that correct?
That's a great description. Yeah. And you do have the
Okay.
map oriented correctly, because in most old churches, you're going to enter on the west side and you're going to progress toward the altar on the east side. So, and that's
Mhm.
how you've got it. And there is symbolism in everything, because they believed that the son of God would rise in the east when he came back, kind of like this,
Yeah.
the physical sun. And so they wanted their churches to face eastward. And for most European churches, eastward was also Jerusalem, which was, is
Sure.
where they believed Christ would return. And
Yep.
so the idea was you're progressing uh, through a reminder of your sinfulness. Like I said, most will have a last judgment on the west entrance door. And you're going to proceed toward redemption, toward the altar, eastward. So that's the reason behind the layout. And the
Great.
reason we're doing this, folks, is obviously you're not going to remember even a fraction of this, but hopefully when you go, if you get to go, there are going to be just a few little snippets that you'll remember, and maybe you're going to see some really beautiful mosaics that
Yeah.
and one or two will stand out, and you're going to mental note, I'm going to look for that when I go.
Sure.
And even just one or two little things will make a really big difference. Just having some tangible thing you can kind of latch onto
Yeah.
that is familiar.
Well, everybody should bookmark this video series. Bookmark this one and go back and bookmark the others. And if you ever go to Italy, Venice, you got to rewatch these videos. But all right, let's take a look here at we're going to start at the narthex, and you got a couple things here we're going to see. All right.
Right. So the narthex, when you go in, oftentimes, like if you're in a tour, or if you've just booked a ticket, they're going to try to shove you through the narthex pretty quickly. And generally you don't get to see that north arm of the narthex anyway. So we're
Yeah.
going to be in the west arm of the narthex. And just try to slow down, even if you have to step out of the way, because there's some really special things in here that are worth seeing. And especially that creation dome, which we'll see in just a second. They want to just push you on through. So I always have to
Right.
actually kind of step out of line in order to stop and see it, but it's worth it.
100%. Yeah, I got some great pictures when I was there, and it is fun when if you're familiar with the Bible, or if you've went through something like Shelley's teaching us here. When you go there, and then you can recognize, and I'll quiz my kids. Hey, what's that showing? What do you think that is over there? And sometimes it looks a little funny or different than how you imagined it. But if you know the stories, or if you know the history, it's fun to read these.
It is. And yeah, so that reminds me of something I wanted to say, because we're obviously looking at a Christian site. that tells the Christian message. So it's going to follow that we're going to be talking about Christian topics. So I hope that's not a put off. If any of you are not Christians, obviously you're very welcome. This is just kind of the topic we're discussing, and it is a beautiful story. I believe it, but even if you don't believe it, maybe just enjoy it for the beauty of the story that's being told.
100%. And let me say this, Shelley, you've told me offline, so often Christians are the most ignorant about their own history. I'm a Christian. This is my history. This is your history. And if you go there and you don't recognize anything up there, then, I guess you're ignorant or you're not prepared to understand this. So, that's why Shelley's sharing this. You can learn something, whether you're Christian or not, but especially if you're Christian, you can appreciate it even more.
It's nice to be able to even share the stories. Like I've been places and seen people just kind of looking like I have no idea what I'm looking at. And just to be able to say, would you like me to tell you the story here? What's going on? And it's not like proselytizing, but just to kindly, people usually appreciate that. So it's nice, you're right, to be able to tell these stories. This is your video.
Right. This is some video just to give some context. When you're in the narthex, just look at all this. This is all mosaic, and it's all, the gold is little tiny reflective gold pieces, but these are, Shelley's got the photographs to show you these different areas, but I just wanted you to kind of see some videos so you can kind of place where each of these domes are.
Yeah. And, everything from about eye level up is just covered with gold. But yeah, go back for just,
sure.
Just back to the narthex one, right before this.
Okay. 1 second. Right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is as you go in. This was to remind me what I was going to say. Okay. The book of Genesis. So on the outside of the church, remember, we saw the end of the story. We saw the descent into limbo. We saw the resurrection. We saw the last judgment. We saw the end of the story. The beginning of the story is in the narthex. This tells us the book of Genesis. So this is where the story kicks off. Okay, so now we can go forward to there we go. So this is in the narthex, and it's a doorway that's no longer used, but these little saints in the niches below the half dome are believed to be the oldest mosaics in the church. And if you see them, they're really that old kind of icon style. They look very Byzantine. And then above, you can see Saint Mark. Can you see him up there with his arms outstretched?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
That's a much later mosaic from the 1500s. And by the 1500s, as they have to replace things, they're using designs by the famous Renaissance artists of the day as the model. So this is actually based on a drawing by Titian, and it's Saint Mark, and his arms are outstretched, and he's dressed as a bishop, and the dove of the Holy Spirit is above him, and it's like he's saying, "Welcome to my basilica."
That's great.
But you can't see it, but the details on his vestments are just magnificent. And when you are there in person, you can see, and he just looks like kind of a jolly guy. So this would be to your left as you enter that doorway. And this is also on your left. This is a big curved vault that you walk under. And this is the story of Noah's Ark.
I love this one. Yeah.
And it's just super charming. So the very top left of this series, we can see, can you see the little rounded blue half circle with the stars and the hand coming out of it?
Oh, yeah.
So that's the hand of God. And he is telling Noah, okay, there's going to be this flood and you need to build an ark. And this is exactly how to do it. So Noah is getting the instructions, and then it moves on. And remember, these are like cartoon strips. So you'll see the same person over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So then Noah, I'm sorry, I keep trying to say Moses. Then Noah and his sons built the ark. That's all on the top strip.
Yep.
We move down a layer. we can see now the ark is finished and Noah is loading the animals into the ark.
I love that he's like manhandling them in. Like he's like helping a lion into
Yeah,
the door.
yeah, get in there.
That's great.
And then on the bottom one, now it's time for his family. And there's these remaining birds, which is very interesting. If there are any Bible scholars out there, you may have spotted this because, in Genesis, it says, bring 7 of each type of animal. But here there's only 2 ravens, 2 storks. So any ideas, David, on what the deal is with these?
I'm not sure.
I don't want to put you on the spot. So the unclean animals, he said only bring 2.
Right.
So
Right.
he's loading up now the unclean birds. I don't know why the artist chose to put them there, but
Okay.
this tells us these are the unclean birds. So you only need 2 each of those.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. And then this is another detail of Noah and the ark. And in really old images like this, the ark often looks like a building or a house. If you've been to the Sistine Chapel, you'll notice that too, that the ark looks like this. It looks like a house. And that's because in the imagery at this time period, the ark represented the church. And the church was a place of safety where humankind could come to for salvation from judgment or destruction. So that was the reason for that. And I just think this is a neat image, the way the artist has chosen to draw the water or do the water in mosaics. And then we see the raven with the carrion in the water. And we see Noah, he's sending out the dove to see if there's any dry land. And what's interesting is all these images in the basilica stick very closely to scripture, that, they'll have every element of the biblical passage. Until we get to some of them, like about Mary's story. Some of those will go beyond scripture, but the ones that are from scripture are very adherent to what the Bible actually says.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Okay, this is
let me ask you something really quick. I'm just curious. This raven is eating something dead. I can't tell from the picture. Is that a person or is that like an animal?
It's an animal.
Oh, okay. Not as gory as it
Not
could
as
have been.
gruesome. Yeah, gruesome, but not
okay.
that bad.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so the creation dome. This is just, you're right under this when you're about to turn left and go into the church. And like I said, they're going to try to shove you through here. But stop and look up because it's just so charming. It's telling the story of the creation and it's just really beautiful. And by the way, the mosaics that they use are pretty small. They're about 1/2 inch diameter or smaller. And all the gold ones are actually covered with gold leaf on the back. And they're intentionally set in not flush, but at a slight angle to cause this glittering effect. And nowadays we don't so much get the glittering effect because it's either natural light or electronic light. So you don't get the full effect. But this reminds me to tell you, if you go and you book a tour, and if you can afford it and have the time, take an after hours nighttime tour of the basilica, because that's when the lighting will be the most authentic, most like the candlelight it was designed for. It's a beautiful experience.
I'm sure that
they really
flickering candle would make it sparkle.
They look gold and they sparkle. But I want to show you some details on this because it's just terrific. You might have to get really close to your computer. But this tells the whole story of the creation, the 7 days of creation, and including the creation of Adam and Eve. So if you think of this as a clock face, and you can see it's got 2 rings. And the first episode in the creation is at about the 9 o'clock or the 9 position. You can see a bird over the water. And that's the very beginning of Jesus. This is in the beginning. It says the earth was void and without form, and the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. And the Spirit of God is always represented as a dove. So that's the first in the series. And then if we go down to the next one to roughly 6 o'clock, we can see the first day where he creates light and dark. And this artist has been super creative in how he tells us this story, because for every day in creation, he gives us that number of angels. So in the one with the red circle and the blue circle, the sun and the moon, there's one angel. That tells us that's the first day, and so forth.
Awesome.
So the next day, we can see three angels. So it's just a very, I think, ingenious way to help people read it from a distance, and so you
Sure.
can
Yeah.
follow it all the way around through the concentric circles.
That is great.
So I'll show you just a couple of details. This is obviously the creation of the animals, and the animals are just a lot of fun to look at. And I think one thing really interesting about this that you'll notice when you see art of this period is look at the creator.
Mm-hmm.
He has a cruciform halo, and he's holding a cross, and he looks very much like Jesus, doesn't he?
Yeah,
He doesn't
for
look like
sure.
an old man like we think of God.
Right.
And this is intentional. So when we see a cruciform halo, that's Christ, and we see the cross. And so this is referencing the book of the Gospel of John. And in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then there's a verse in the beginning of Colossians, I think, that says, Christ was there at the very beginning, and by him and through him was everything
Yeah.
created. So they're reflecting that concept in scripture pictorially.
Beautiful. I love it. Yeah, I was struck by, he doesn't even have a beard. He definitely looks like a young man,
Mhm.
it's pretty
Yeah,
beautiful. And
it's
here he is again.
the pre-carnate Christ. Uh,
Right.
this is, well, first of all, can you tell me what day this is?
Looks like the sixth day.
Yeah,
That would
yeah.
make
We
sense.
see
I'm
six
seeing a
angels.
man here, so yeah.
Creation of Adam. And don't you love the angel on the far right? He's kind of doing the ta-da!
Ta-da! Yeah, that's great.
And Adam is very dark because it's there's a lot of things that are shown very literally, not that they really thought that, but just to help us read it. And what does it remind us of? That he's kind of dirty looking.
Oh, okay. It's made from the earth.
Yeah, yeah, because he's
Yeah,
going to be cleaned up in the next scene, but he's just been made. And
great.
I'll go
Whoop, I
back
can
one
go
more
back.
thing. So
Yep.
I'll drive you crazy, David, but I'm such a detail person. I just look at these things and try to notice everything. But in all the other creation scenes, the creator creates from a distance. He stands back and he
Oh,
creates.
yeah.
And this one,
Very
he's
nice.
near, and he's
He's forming it with his hands.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very intimate. Yeah.
It's beautiful. That is such great symbology. It's,
Hmm.
yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Which is what we read in Genesis. Yeah, he formed
Yeah.
them and then blew his breath into him to
Hmm.
bring him to life.
Hmm.
This is another photograph I took, and this is in the narthex. This is Elijah. The reason I wanted to include this, you talked about the sparkle of the
Hmm.
gold leaf, and yeah, when the light hits it, it's like looking at the sun. I mean, the camera can't even capture how brilliant it is, but it really is just brilliant and gorgeous, and it's a sight you got to see in real life. These pictures do not do it justice.
It is. And yeah, and I'm trying to work without notes, so I'm kind of thinking of things I want to say as we go. But if you'll back up to Elijah for a
Sure.
second. So there's different, like I said, there's different phases of mosaics. The apostles in the little niches under Mark when we first came in, those are some of the very earliest from the Byzantine school. The
Okay.
creation dome is from the Venetian school, which is just a little bit later. They, to me, are the most fun to look at, the ones from the Venetian school. Now, these that look
Yeah.
like this, they look very different. They're much later. They're what they're called the Roman school. They're replacements usually, and you can tell they have a much different look. They look much more like a painting. They don't have that kind of icon looking
Right.
stylized feel. They have much more look like more of a
Literal. Yeah,
painting.
for sure. Yep.
So yeah, so this is just this is a gorgeous view of the ceiling, just looking up as we come in. There are I think there are over 80 something thousand. Let me see if I've got it. There's the mosaics on this church are enough to cover 1.5 football fields, 85,000
Wow.
square feet of
That's
mosaic
incredible.
tiles on the interior alone.
Wow.
If you count the exterior, it's over 92,000 square feet of these tiny mosaics. So it's over 2 acres of mosaic. So it's just the
You
largest,
think about,
highest.
yeah, the time, the expense, the labor of love and dedication, and I'm always amazed at these old churches. Like, we're going to start building this now, and it's not going to be done for 400 years. But
Yeah,
I don't care because I'm committed to this long term project. And can you imagine your great great grandson or something working on it and knowing, like, my dad and his dad and his dad and his dad, we've all
yeah,
worked on this.
yeah.
This is our life mission for something greater than us. It's a glory to
Mhm,
God. It's for our culture to know our history and to know our
mhm.
religion. It's beautiful.
It is a beautiful story. Yeah.
Yeah,
And this is such a marvelous collection of just world-class mosaics. It's just a real treasure house.
amazing.
I think this is another of yours.
Oh, you know what? I think this was a video of the interior. I'm going to try to play this here. Let's see if this will play. Yeah. Nope. This is the one we've already seen.
Oh,
All
okay.
right. We'll skip it because it won't play in the slideshow that I've got. But it was
Okay.
basically just showing us this, but in video, as we
Okay.
kind of step inside of the church.
This is a view from the second level. So if you go up to see the museum, you can actually see the old women's gallery. So we're looking towards the altar. We're still on the west end, but we're upstairs. And these two galleries on either side used to be for women because back in the early days when Venice followed more the Byzantine culture, women were much more separated in life and in worship. And then after that, when they stopped being used for women's galleries, they became used for musical purposes. I think I did a video on that talking about the evolution of how this changed. And then the acoustics would be just gorgeous as they, the kind of echoing back and forth across the galleries in the space with the domes and
Yeah,
everything.
I would love to be there for a service like that where you can hear it. You know, it would be fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. My sister and I stumbled into one once, and it was beautiful. They had a men's choir from Sheffield, England, and they were just totally a cappella, and it just is gorgeous. Just the sound of their voices. They could have whispered, and we could have heard. It's just
Oh,
really
that's
beautiful.
amazing.
So yes, there
Okay,
is.
good.
I talk a lot about how in Venice, they do their own thing. It's kind of a hodgepodge, a little bit here, a little bit there. But even in all the hodgepodgeness of it, there is an interior organization. So I just wanted to talk about this. So when you look at the gold domes and vaults, think of that as the heavenly zone. In the old art, the old altarpieces, that when it's gold, that's representing we're in a different realm. And then
Okay.
the walls and the floors are the earthly zone. So the walls are gorgeous, but they're marble. They're not glittery gold. And
Right.
then the domes relate to the Godhead, to big themes. And then the large vaults that are between the domes will tell the stories related to those domes. And then going down the sides are stories about the history of the church and the big saints. And then on the smaller vaults and piers, it's more like everyday saints that are maybe not biblical saints, maybe saints who came next after the Bible period. But there is this what they call a divine interconnectedness between all of these elements.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's good to understand for sure.
This is just another view looking toward the altar and the iconostasis, and then you have added a really pretty picture of the censer or incense burner.
And I'm going to skip ahead here and enlarge this photo. I love this. You see it in your picture of I think the iconostasis is what it's called. But look at the detail on this. You can see the lion of St. Mark right there, kind of in the middle of the censer. I think it's so beautiful. And he's got his book that you've told us about. And yeah, it's really, really amazing.
Okay, so this is to find a picture of the interior empty of people and seats and ropes and everything else. I had to find a painting. So this is a painting from the late 1800s. But again, you can see we're standing in the central nave and we're looking toward the apse or toward the altar. And just to show you, there's just so many different types of marble covering everything. And it's just really beautiful. It's also a good reminder that pews in churches are a fairly new thing. You used to just stand for a worship service. And even though we see kneeling rails here, those are even new.
Okay.
In the big scheme of history, they're new. You would just kneel on the concrete, and that was just kind of part of mortification of the flesh.
Shelly, I got a quick question here. Simplify Life, thank you for tuning in. He's left a question, or she's left a question, I don't know. Says, is the hand of God depicted in other art? So going back to the Genesis scene, we saw the hand of God and the stars. It says, is the hand of God depicted in other art? And if so, is it always depicted as reaching out of blue with white stars?
Ah, that's a great question. Okay. So first of all, yes, it is shown in art often like that. A lot of times when you'll see the hand of God reaching down like that, it's in the story of Abraham and Isaac, when he's about to sacrifice Isaac, and all of a sudden the hand reaches down from heaven and says, stop. And so that's one time when you'll see it, but you do see it a lot, especially in older art, because you didn't see God really portrayed very often. That was unusual. You started seeing it more during the Renaissance, but not in the earlier periods. But you would see the hand of God often.
Okay. Yeah, they were so cautious about even writing the name of God or making an image. He's the invisible God. So that makes sense. Yeah. This is the video I was trying to show earlier. This is standing up on the second floor, I believe, about to walk outside by the horses on the loggia. But this is just to kind of give you a sense of the vastness of the church, looking in the domes and the vaults. We're going to kind of walk through these domes and vaults, and you can see the iconostasis is kind of that wall there in the middle, in front of the group of people. So just to kind of give you a feel for that. We'll go back to your slideshow here. So now we're approaching this, I think you call it the iconostasis there in the middle.
Yeah, like some people refer to these as a rood screen or an altar screen. They're different little technicalities and meaning, but they kind of basically mean the same thing. But it's just a screen between the congregation and the sacred place of the altar. And then with the Reformation, for a lot of churches, that screen went away and there was no longer the separation. But in old churches, oftentimes it remains. But
yeah,
it's really gorgeous with all these panels of exotic marble and these statues. You can't really tell when you're there, but the statues are life-size statues. You don't realize that they're that big, but
yeah, it is incredible. This is a picture of the crucifix, and I took this photograph. If you look to Jesus' right hand, which would be on our left, again, you see the familiar lion with his book, who we all know by now is St. Mark. So just another cool little Easter egg hidden there
Yeah,
for us.
yeah, and it's a silver cross. It's got some bronze touches, but it's silver. It's very tarnished, but it's silver. And it's got the four evangelists on each arm. So we see on the
Oh,
left
okay.
Mark, on the right we see Luke, and yeah, it's really
Yeah, I didn't
special.
even know that. Great. All right, where are we headed next?
So we're heading up into the altar area, and we're going to look at the gorgeous, very famous ciborium, sometimes called the baldachin or the baldacchino, and we'll take a look at the incredible Polidoro.
Okay. Now, Shelley, I
Mhm.
hear all the time, I see posts all the time about Bernini's Baldacchino in St. Peter's Basilica,
Mhm.
Rome. What is the purpose of this thing? What is a Baldacchino, or a what'd you call it? A cymbalum? Not a cymbalum. That's a musical instrument.
Yeah, ciborium, right?
Ciborium.
Ciborium,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like a holy canopy, usually over an altar that contains a body or a relic. But it's like a holy covering, a tabernacle, and they're usually made of very precious materials and just really
Yeah.
beautiful. So this one
And
in
so,
St. Mark's is covered with this gorgeous serpentine stone at the top.
and this is a great time to mention then what is that in the white box there, kind of in the middle?
So that is the tomb where supposedly Saint Mark's body is, and I think we're going to talk about that a little bit at the end.
Yeah.
And we're looking. So we're looking. Which way are we looking?
Be east.
I think so. So
Yeah.
they've got the Polidoro turned around, so it's usually facing backwards. So
Okay.
they've got it turned around on holy days and festival days. They will turn it out in this direction.
Okay.
And it's got these four very ornately carved alabaster columns. They're solid alabaster and they're very precious.
Wow.
They're from, like, scholars think around the 1600s, and some scholars think they were carved very close to that same time. Some scholars think later, but they're just gorgeous. If you just stop and look, the detail's incredible, but there's so much to see. You miss a lot of these things because there's stuff everywhere. There was a movie that came out a few years ago. I think it was called, like, Everything All the Time Everywhere or
All at
something like
once or
that.
something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
that's how it feels when you're in there.
Yeah, for sure.
And so this is just a detail of the Polidoro. It's very hard to get a good picture of it because it's behind glass, but it's very large. It's much larger than you think until you see it. But it's a silver frame, a huge frame made of silver, and then the silver is covered with gold, and it's these old precious enameled pieces with all kinds of precious jewels. It's got over 1,900 precious gems on the Polidoro,
Wow.
and it's very old. The earliest
Is
parts of it are from the 900s, and the newest parts of it are from the 1300s. So
is there what is the purpose of a Polidoro? Like, why is it called that? Are these in other churches? I'm not familiar.
it's just a beautiful altar screen that an early doge had commissioned just to decorate the altar, and then they added
Okay.
to it. It got bigger over the years. I just did a video on it and stuck it up on X today, kind of telling a little bit of the story of it. That
Which is a good reminder, folks. You need to follow Shelly. Not right now, but as soon as the show's over, if you're not following her, follow her. And right now, let me ask if you could please, if you're watching, hey, go in the comments, not of the comment of the post, but click on the video and go to the live chat and say hello. Let us know you're watching. And we would really appreciate it if you would repost this post so other people can join as well. Let them know you're watching right now. And if you're just tuning in now, you can always go back and watch the beginning of this later because it's recorded. So Continue on, Shelley. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me that the Polidora that is just so old and so valuable is still just there for us to walk up and
it's not in a
see.
museum. It's still there in its setting, for worship and for us to enjoy.
So we've been heading eastward toward the altar. So we're going to turn to the left or to the north, and we're going to just take a peek in this tiny chapel that not many people know about, but that holds the second greatest treasure of the basilica, what used to be considered the greatest treasure.
Wow.
And it's this little icon painting, and it's called the Madonna Nicopoeia, and that just means the bringer of victory, the Madonna, the bringer of victory. And she used to live in Constantinople and would be paraded out before big battles or big events. And then she was brought to Venice after the Fourth Crusade. And she was just considered to be very holy and very special. You can see all the jewels in her frame. And a long, long time ago, the belief was that she was actually painted by Luke, St. Luke the Apostle. And I think I've got another image after this one. Yeah.
Yep.
So there was a belief that Luke used to be a painter and that he was divinely inspired to paint this painting of the Madonna, and that's what all these other icon paintings of the Madonna were based on. And we can see in this image on the left that an angel is guiding him, how to paint it, because obviously when Luke was around, Jesus was no longer a baby. So it's divinely inspired. Now, actually, this was painted by Luke, but it was painted by Luke Cangalaris. So a Greek icon painter, hundreds of years after the Apostle Luke lived. So maybe that's where the legend came from. Luke.
You're seeing the Nicopoeia was painted by this other gentleman
named Luke, right?
Okay. Well, it's a different topic, but I posted something the other day that I think in Rome, in the Santa Maria Maggiore church, is a painting just like this, maybe attributed to Luke as being like the earliest depiction of Mary. Am I right?
Yeah, there are several of them that at some time in history have claimed that.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Intriguing.
And that's why some pictures you see of Luke, he's got a little easel and he's painting. That's
okay.
But if you'll go back, I had a little reminder here on that one screen. So see the little guy on horseback? That's to remind. So in the Middle Ages, this was the height of the veneration of Mary. And, she was like the best go-between you and Jesus, which makes sense, especially for Italians. The mother holds all sway, and it's like, who better to go to Jesus with a favor than go to his mom? And but there's a tie-in with the Middle Ages and chivalry to the cult of Mary. You remember the knight who would dedicate everything to the lady fair, the pure lady. He would devote his life and his feats of valor, all in honor of this lady. Well, this gets picked up in the Middle Ages. People like Saint Francis. He grew up wanting to be a knight, a chivalrous knight, and Mary becomes his lady of purity. And so this veneration of Mary gets kind of wrapped in to the chivalrous notion, and that pushes the veneration of Mary forward even more during that period. I always thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, by the way, Kathy says absolutely amazing pictures and information. So well done, Shelley.
Appreciate that. So we're still in this north transept. We're just going to turn and look at this beautiful mosaic with the story of the tree of Jesse. So if we're going to follow Jesus' life, we have to go back to the Old Testament and look at some of the prophecies. And one of the main prophecies was that the Messiah was going to come from the line of Jesse. Jesse was in the line of David. And so what you see here are the ancestors of Jesus, and they're in this tree. And the depictions of the tree of Jesse, it's hard to explain. There's a reference in Isaiah that says basically the whole line of David is going to be wiped out, but there's going to be just a root, just a stump left. And it became known as the root of Jesse, or the tree of Jesse. So in really old depictions of Jesse, you'll see him laying down and the tree's actually growing out of his stomach. This is the later one. So the tree's kind of behind him, but there's Jesse asleep. And then here's all his ancestors leading up to Christ. And so I think it's just a really pretty mosaic. And it makes me wonder if that's where we got the concept of the family tree, showing our family like that. But you can tell looking at this one too, that this is a later one, right? Just by the way the bodies are modeled.
Right, for sure. It looks more Renaissance,
stylized. Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, so we're just going to now turn to the left. This is going to be an older set of mosaics that we're about to look at. These are from the earliest, the Byzantine school, and we can see how Greek these look. And this is actually the Orthodox version of the story of Mary and the Annunciation, which is a little bit different than in the West. And you can tell that over her head that the letters are in Greek, and the letters stand for Mary, Mother of God. And if you have a really keen eye, you'll notice in the Basilica that most of the inscriptions, the letters are in Latin, unless it's Jesus or Mary, and then they're in Greek because that was the more elegant, sophisticated language.
Interesting.
But we see on the left, again, think of a cartoon where we're going to see Mary twice. On the left, Mary's getting water from the well, and this is the Annunciation when Gabriel is telling her what's going to happen. And then on the right, there was a story, I'm not sure I'll get it right, but that all the virgins were put on this project to make curtains for the synagogue, or for the temple, I mean. And Mary, because she was the purest of all the virgins, was given the special job of dyeing the fabric purple. Remember, purple was the color of royalty, and that's what we see here. So it's a little bit of a different take than the Western story of Mary.
Okay. Yeah, that's new to me.
And this
I like this one. Yeah.
Yeah. So on the left, again, it's the same story in two parts. There's always something dividing. So in this one, it's a tall building dividing two parts of the scene. On the left, this is after Mary and Joseph have been betrothed. He's found out that she's with child. He's about to give her an honorable divorce to protect her. And he's sleeping. And this is when the angel comes and says, no, Joseph, she really is telling the truth. She really is pregnant by God. She's bearing the Savior. And you should take her to be your wife. And so he's dreaming. And I don't know why he's levitating, but it may just be this was not the most skilled of the crew. But anyway, it's kind of charming. And then on the right, we see the flight to Egypt, where they've been warned in another dream that you need to get out of Judea and flee to Egypt. And they've got their servant, who interestingly is dressed in medieval clothing. They're still dressed in the Bible type clothing, but he's in medieval clothing. And I don't know what he's carrying, but he evidently travels very light because his bag doesn't have much in it.
Looks like Hobo Joe. Yeah, along for the ride. Okay. Yeah, I was curious who that fellow was there. All right, so next we're headed to the baptistry, which is kind of on the southern end, closer to the foot of the cross.
Yeah, it's actually a separate room and it's really beautiful. Sometimes you can peek in and sometimes you can't. But this is my favorite image in the baptistry. So we know as Jesus matures and he's about to start his ministry in obedience to God, he gets baptized by John the Baptist, and that's what this is showing. And I just think the imagery is really charming. But there's
Yeah.
some meaning here too. We can see John kind of placing his hands on Jesus in a very sacramental way. You still see priests in some churches do that. In the Old Testament, they would place their hand on the head of the sacrificial animal like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
And we can see the very jagged rock formations, maybe kind of foreshadowing either the violent, suffering that's going to come to Jesus, maybe foreshadowing that, or maybe indicating the kind of bare, rough existence of John the Baptist. And then we see the little angels in attendance. And usually if you see angels at the baptism of Christ, their hands will be covered. And that's a sign of reverence. So their hands are
Oh,
covered. And I like their red
yeah.
socks. I think those are kind of snazzy.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see the Holy Spirit descending as a dove. And
Yeah.
I imagine that's supposed to be God the Father, kind of the celestial kind of ominous cloud up there. What do you know? What is this child or small person in the bottom of
I
the
think
screen?
go one slide forward. I think I may have
Okay.
a closer image. Okay.
Yeah.
So a couple of things here. Look at Jesus' hand. Can you can
Oh
you see
yeah.
his
He's
hand?
like peace. Yeah.
He's blessing the water. That's his sign of
Yeah.
blessing. And
Yeah.
so the Orthodox belief was when Jesus was baptized that he sanctified the waters. Like if you are a Bible scholar, it says that with the fall of man also came the fall of creation, and creation has
Okay.
been groaning and waiting in
Yeah.
expectation for its renewal.
Yep.
That Christ sanctified the waters, and so that way the meaning is, so when you're baptized, the waters have been sanctified. Not fully, it's still a fallen world, but
Right.
he did sanctify them. And so that also relates to the little guy in the water. You see this in some really old depictions of baptism scenes. The little guy in the water is usually not this harmless looking, but there was the belief. Remember, this is still way back when there's still pagan stuff going on in recent memory.
Yeah.
And in pagan cults, rivers and trees were often centers of pagan worship. And so this is like a river god that is kind of hustling to get out of there because the waters
Oh,
are
okay.
being sanctified.
That's great. I love that. Fantastic. Okay. Next, we're headed to the garden, kind of following the life of Christ here.
So yeah, if we step back outside the baptistry and look at, this is one of the biggest mosaic cycles in the church. It covers a big expanse, and this is only part of it, but it's just gorgeous. The details on it are just amazing. If you look at the plants and the composition, and
This kind of looks stylistically between the Greek and the Renaissance. Does it fall chronologically there also?
This is probably from the 1200s.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's, I don't know. I just think it's super charming that it's the agony in the garden, or the Garden of Gethsemane, however you've grown up hearing about it. But it's
Yeah.
when Jesus knows his time is up, his time of death is rapidly approaching. He goes all night to the garden to pray, and he asks his friends, his closest friends, the 12 disciples, to come with him and pray with him, and they just can't stay awake.
Yeah.
And there he is, and he's talking to Peter and saying, can you just stay awake and pray with me? And by the way, this is typically how Peter is depicted in art. Peter is almost always depicted with short white curly hair and a short white squared off beard. So we know this is Peter, even though he doesn't have his keys. And then
Yeah. Interesting.
we see Jesus up on top of the mountain.
Yeah.
And it's he's just praying in agony. And then I think I've got another picture after this that kind of shows it to you in context to see how big it is. And it's really hard to get good pictures of the mosaics here because of the funny angles and the lighting and the distance. But this just kind of gives you a sense of the scale. And then it also shows you some of the lower walls where it's just the exotic marbles and it's not
Yes.
the golden mosaics.
That's what I was going to point out. The St. Mark's, the exterior and the interior is so beautiful like this. It's like these book matched marbles. If you're familiar with wood, where they'll split a log and then open it up, you can see the mirrored grain. They've done that with the marble here, and it is just so beautiful. Amazing.
It is, yeah. And these, they're just costless, priceless marbles that just really look pretty dull compared to the mosaics.
This next scene here is one of my favorites. I love this, and I didn't notice this when I was there until I looked at your pictures. This is fantastic.
So this is going to run across the central vault of the central part of the church. So the most important stories get the most prominence, and this is the betrayal. So this is what happens immediately after the night in the garden, and Judas the traitor has arranged a sign that the one that I kiss, he's the one that you are to arrest. And that's what we see happening here. And so we see the kiss of Judas, and we see some interesting things. We see on the right, we see a sign that says crucify him or crucify the king. And we're not supposed to think someone literally showed up with a sign. It's just to kind of clue us into what they were saying or what they were thinking. And if you go to the next, so on the left, here's Peter. Remember Peter with the short white haircut, short square white beard. That's Peter. Was a little bit of a hothead. So in this scuffle, he ends up cutting off the ear of one of the servants of one of the high priests. But I like this because they're just so casual about this act of violence that's taking place. It's like, oh,
you see the knife in his hand. Yeah, he's grabbing the ear. He's got the knife.
Yeah.
Sorry, Malchus, the ear's coming off. Yeah.
Very chill about the whole thing.
Jesus healed him, everybody. So don't worry. Malchus turned out okay.
That's right.
I love it.
So yeah, so this is where the one we just saw is on this center vault that David has marked here. And also on this vault, we're going to see the crucifixion and kind of the culmination of the Easter story.
Okay.
So here's the crucifixion. It's just really beautiful. It is arranged kind of like a devotional piece, or like an icon piece might be arranged, where it kind of contains all the key aspects of the story. So we see at the top of the cross, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. We see that he's on the cross. We see the soldier who's piercing his side. The soldier on the left is piercing his side, where the water and the blood come out, as in the Bible story. We see the guy on the right who offers up a sponge with vinegar in it. This guy I don't know if he had a talking to afterwards, but it's like, that's the armpit. Anyway, that's what that is. That's the sponge where the guy lifts it up to Jesus' lips.
Okay.
We see underneath, we see the two soldiers throwing the dice for Jesus' clothing.
Yeah.
And they're a little bit cropped, but on the left, which would be Jesus' right, we see his mother, Mary. You can see her hand gesturing to him. When we see Mary like that, gesturing towards Jesus, like we did in the Madonna Nicopoeia icon painting, that's Madonna Hodegetria, however you want to say it. And that means she who shows the way. And, in the Bible, it says Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And so she's showing us the way. This is the way. And then on the other side is John the Evangelist. And he's there because, remember, when Jesus is on the cross, he says, I commend the care of my mother to you, John.
Yeah.
So in crucifixion scenes, those are the most two common people that we see are Mary and John. And underneath, it's very hard to see, but you can see a tiny skull, and that represents Adam, the first man. I think that's the skull. And
Is that the foot of the cross? Is that where we're looking?
I think that's the little white thing. Let me make sure I'm not telling you wrong.
Oops, I skipped ahead here.
And almost every crucifixion scene, it has that. But
okay,
I don't want to swear to it. But in
he was crucified at Golgotha, which is the place of the skull, but it's also representative of Adam and the first Adam.
Right, because he, since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection from the dead. Okay.
Beautiful. Yeah, such rich symbology.
So this is just looking at these two scenes. So if we were to look at the right of that center vault, we would see the crucifixion. And if we would see on the left is the betrayal. So it almost reads left to right from this angle. And
it's almost hard. I mean, the ceiling is high in here. It's almost difficult to see these. You really gotta know ahead of time what you're looking at. I've got a camera that's got a big zoom lens, so I can zoom in and catch the detail. But it'd almost be worthwhile bringing a little binoculars or something so you can see it. Just if you're wanting to see this kind of detail.
This
is great. I love this one.
And this is the kind of the Easter story when the women show up at the tomb and it's an empty tomb and they find an angel there who says, "He's not here, he is risen," and is pointing to the burial cloth. And then we saw this scene also on the exterior of the church. It's called the descent into limbo. It's also referred to as the harrowing of hell, where Jesus, in some denominations, they believe that he literally descended into hell after his death, before his resurrection, and preached the good news to the captives of hell. And that's what we see here. And we can see, if you look under his feet, he's trampled down the gates of hell. You can see the keys to the gates of hell. You can see Satan trampled under his feet. So death has been defeated. Satan's power over these people has been defeated, and he's literally pulling them out of hell. So he's pulled out Adam and Eve. On the right, we see some of the kings and prophets. So that's what's happening here.
I love this image. I loved it on the exterior when you showed it to us, and I love it here. His descent into hell wasn't his suffering hell. He was there victorious. He had conquered death, and he was taking the saints with him to heaven. We have a question from Simplify Life. Does the red around the tomb in the Easter portrayal represent anything? So let me go back here. So there's the red around the tomb. Great question.
Yeah, it is a good question. It does not that I know of. It may just be to make it visible from a great distance.
Like a focal point.
I don't know of any symbolism of why that would be red.
Interesting. That's something Simplify Life. If you want to research that and let Shelly and me know, that's a great question.
Report back.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so now we got the Ascension Dome and then the Pentecost Dome. So we're still continuing on with the life of Jesus.
Yeah, so the Ascension Dome is in the very center of the church, meaning that this one has some of the most important theological significance. And it's just breathtakingly beautiful. It's considered by many scholars to be the most beautiful example of Byzantine art in the world. And what it's showing us is Christ is ascending into heaven as his followers look on. He's being borne aloft by angels. You can see the angels surrounding him. When you see a blue background with gold stars, that's the heavens.
Okay.
And we see his disciples on the ground looking up in amazement, and very beautifully they're separated by these really pretty trees. The trees don't mean anything except that they're separators.
Yeah.
And in this story, remember that two angels appear and they say, "Why are you looking up?"
Right.
And
He's
so
not
we've got
here.
the two angels. The only thing that's maybe not according to Hoyt is the Virgin Mary. She's not specifically named in that passage of the Bible, but she's there
Right.
between the two angels. So she's kind of at the 4 o'clock position if this were a clock. And we
Right.
can see that she's in what is called an orants position. Orants is ORANTS. And that's just a symbol in art that someone's praying. So we see that she's interceding, she's interceding, she's praying. And in between the windows, you can see little figures, and those are the virtues: faith, hope, love,
Oh, okay.
fortitude, prudence, things like that.
Beautiful. I love. I think you got some pictures coming up closer. Well, this is the Pentecost dome. But the tongues
Right.
of fire. Yeah.
Yes. So what happens is, after the resurrection and then Jesus ascends, but he tells his followers, "Don't worry, because after I'm gone, you'll be filled with my spirit, and everything's going to make sense, and it's going to empower you. And I want you to go out and tell the whole world this good news, of reconciliation to God." And so Pentecost was when they're gathered together and the Holy Spirit does come upon them. And I'm going to show you a closer look, but I want to point out a couple of things
Oh,
first.
okay.
So I just want you to, if you have it on your computer where you can see details, look at the angels. They're just gorgeous. And the detail on them. And they're singing glory to God, basically. And then I love the beautiful round design to the right. You don't see many things in the basilica that are just pure
Oh, yeah.
design. And I think that's just really beautiful.
Yeah. It's kind of cut off by the picture, right? But it's on the
That
edge of this
is,
edge of the
that is
picture
a
there. That
really
is
nice
pretty.
design. So let's look at
Yeah.
some details, because this is a really interesting dome. So at the very center, there is an empty throne with the Word of God and the dove of the Holy Spirit on it. And we saw this last week on the north facade, and this is called a etymologia, and it's just the prepared throne that Jesus will occupy when he comes back for the last judgment and to begin his reign and his eternal kingdom. So that's what that represents. And from that are coming these flames of inspiration to the disciples. So I'll show you a couple of more details. So here's a couple of the apostles. On the left, who do you think this is? David, with the short white hair and the short square beard.
Must be Peter.
It's Peter. Yeah, he's pretty easy to spot. So they have their those are just the representing the flames of inspiration. And on the right, so there are some saints that it's easy to represent because it's very, they're easy to identify because of how they're represented, because it's
Uh-huh.
fairly consistent. So the Apostle Paul almost always has dark hair and a receding hairline and a long beard,
Right.
as opposed
That's
to
funny that they
Mark.
pictured him here at Pentecost because he
Yeah.
wasn't
So
part of the
they're kind
group
of
at that point.
stepping outside of scripture a little
Yeah.
bit. But remember, Judas is off. The
Sure.
new one who replaced Judas has not yet been trained, but Paul is a much more important figure,
Right.
kind of like they showed Mary at the Ascension. You got to get the
Right.
key players.
And he
But
did receive the inspiration, so it's fitting that he would have
yeah,
also received
yeah.
the tongue of fire. Sure. That's
But
great.
yeah, so Paul's easy to recognize. Now, Mark also has dark hair, but Mark has dark hair and a short beard and a head full of hair usually. So that's how to tell them apart.
Shelley, I love your wealth of knowledge. This is awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for saying it that way.
Yeah.
You can easily call me a nerd, but so this, yeah, a couple more details. This is the dove on the throne. So even something that's so far away, they've still just built in really intricate details. But here we can see the individual little tiny mosaic tiles. And on
Yeah.
the right is Bartholomew. And I'm just showing you him just to show you some of the detail. I love how they do the hair. And again, these have
Yeah.
the Byzantine features with the big knowing eyes, the long straight nose, tiny little mouth. But that was just the style of how they were depicted back then.
Beautiful.
And okay, so we're still looking at the Pentecost dome. And in between the windows on the Pentecost dome, I love this. Remember, it said, go out and proclaim to all the nations. And at Pentecost, when they all of a sudden are speaking in the tongues and the languages of all these people who are visiting Jerusalem for the Passover, all these people here. And so these are the people around the windows, is from all these nations. So here are a few. The guys on the left are from Cyprus. In the middle are from Judea, and on the right are from Egypt. So just representing all the different people groups that heard the message.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Okay, so now we'll head just take one more look at the altar area before we make our way out.
Okay, and these all have these such funny names I'd never heard until this. Pantocrator. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. So Christ, there's all these ways of depicting Christ, and Christ Pantocrator is Christ Almighty. So this is he's been incarnated, he's lived on earth, he's died, he's ascended, and now he is reigning from heaven. So that's Christ Pantocrator, Christ Almighty. And you can tell by the style of this one that this one is much later, right? This is from the 1500s.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Totally
very,
different style.
it's a lot of the three-dimensional aspects, looks much newer, but it's still very beautiful.
Absolutely.
And now we're going to head out through the doors on the west end of the church. And in many old churches, as you leave, you will be greeted with an image like this that's called a decis. And it's Christ flanked by Mary and John, typically. Mary and John the Baptist, typically, because they were considered the two most powerful intercessors for humanity. And so you'll see Christ on the throne blessing, and you'll see them both in the orans position interceding. And you'll see again, like I mentioned earlier, we see this is Saint Mark. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but notice that his name is in Latin.
Okay.
Sanctus Marcus. But Jesus and Mary, their names are in Greek. So
very interesting.
Pretty consistent. But I think since this is St. Mark's church, St. Mark has gotten to take the place of where John the Baptist would normally be, because after all, that's what your patron saint does for you, is he intercedes for you. So this is an unusual deicist, but it's typical in the fact that it's there blessing us on our way as we leave the church.
I love that you pointed out that hierarchy of how they do their names, because I had noticed the Latin for like Elijah and things like that, but I hadn't noticed the distinction that Christ and Mary are always in Greek. That's really interesting.
And then one more thing on that. Sorry, go back.
Sure.
So this is on our way out. It's always over a doorway. And so Jesus' book is open to the passage, I am the way, he who enters through me. So again, referring to that, Jesus as the way.
Beautiful.
This is just to show you, because we didn't have time to look at the floors. We've really only just covered just a fraction of all the many beautiful things in this church. But I hope it'll be helpful for people who plan to go to, like I said, pick out a couple of things. But this shows the earthly realm. The floors are still gorgeous. They're still kind of mosaic, but they're dull. They're not polished. And then the walls are this gorgeous marble. Like David said, it's been flayed out and mirror images. So it kind of looks like that watered silk that you see that kind of has the watery pattern to it.
So beautiful.
Yeah. So in churches like this, there is a purpose. It's to hit us at our emotional level to move us. It's to convict us of our need for the salvation that this church offers. And it's to instruct us in the stories of the faith that we can see. And if we lived back in this time, we would know a lot of the symbols, that we would be able to read and know who's who and what does this stand for. So
Yeah. We think we're so much smarter today, but in a lot of ways we've lost a lot of that knowledge. So it's great to be learning it again.
yeah. And then I think at the end you had something you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so this is a little controversial or interesting thing that's come up here. So this is St. Mark's Basilica that has St. Mark's relics. You told us last week through the story of the exterior how his body was brought here in the 9th century. Correct me if I'm wrong. There is some interesting discussion nowadays that possibly the lost body of Alexander the Great might actually be the body that is thought to be that of St. Mark's. So I'm interested to hear your take. I'm going to kind of show some pictures here just so you guys kind of know where this is coming from. In the 1960s, maybe 1969, I think, they did kind of a survey of St. Mark's Basilica, and they were looking at the foundational stones. And very near where St. Mark's body is, they found this stone right here. And this is a Macedonian funerary stone. And it bears a Macedonian shield. You can see that in the picture on the right, that circular object with a sun in it. And it has that star motif in the center. We'll look at something else about that on the next picture. There's also a pair of greaves and a long lance. So you can see it looks like an arm next to the shield holding up a spear. That's the lance, okay? And then on the smallest side, the picture on the left, that's kind of the edge of it. There's the remnants of a sword. I'm gonna click to the next slide. You can kind of see they've kind of outlined these. And that sword is called a copus. I think I'm pronouncing that right. But basically they're saying, okay, this is a Macedonian sword. This is a Macedonian sarissa or spear. It's a Macedonian shield, and the greaves there, and the shield bears the star. And if you look at this image here, the star motif bears a striking resemblance to the star of Vergina or star of Macedon. It was a symbol closely associated with Alexander's family and visible on many related tombs. So there's another tie, not only to the Macedonians, but to the family of Alexander. And then on the right, this is a picture from the British Museum in London. And this is a sarcophagus. And now there's some speculation here. I'm going to go back a slide. If you look at this slab of stone, you can see the dotted line on the right. They're kind of projecting out how big the stone would have been based on the angle of the spear. You can see how they've kind of projected that there. Based on that, they're saying that that stone would perfectly fit this sarcophagus on the right. And the sarcophagus is that of Nectanebo II, who was a pharaoh of Egypt. My understanding is, though, that they think that his tomb was a temporary tomb for Alexander the Great. So they're thinking, some people have speculated, did the Venetians actually indeed steal the body of Alexander the Great, bring him to Venice, and everybody thinks that it's St. Mark? So, Shelley, do you have any knowledge on this? Do you want to speak to this at all?
Yeah, I mean, I can't.
If you're listening, and you've gotten ideas, drop them in the comments below, and we'll take those here in a second.
Definitely, I can't speak to it with much authority, but Andrew Chugg is the scholar who has put forward this theory, and it's really is pretty intriguing, and he's got some good arguments. Like, David's laid out some of them. So here's some other things that he has said. For one thing, traditionally, and a lot of really old sources, it talks about after Mark was killed, his body was burned. And there's really not much mention of St. Mark's body until the 4th century, which is about the same time that Alexander's body disappears. So what he's thinking is that, okay, in Alexandria, as they're starting to, as the Christian church is gaining power and they're starting to destroy these pagan monuments, that someone said, in order to protect Alexander's tomb, they said, oh no, it's not Alexander, it's St. Mark. And so that's how his body supposedly got protected in Alexandria. And then these were found with, the symbols that kind of relate back to Alexander the Great and his family line. And then David's talked about some of the other evidence that Andrew Chugg has presented, which is really compelling. And, who knows whose body it is. I'll say that for one thing,
Shelley, you know what? The timer on this was set for 1.5 hours. It just ended. So I'm going to do something. Yeah. I'm going to